What's up everybody? I'm back on camera again. I'm gonna show you how to create a viral design today. Before I start, if you want a design critique, send it to me in a DM, and I think I'm gonna start doing live critiques. You can check that out, watch me critique your designs. Let's get into it. We're gonna start with a black background, and I'm gonna put a white color fill over top of that, and use a layer mask with a gradient to make it slowly gradient from black to white, or I guess quickly gradient from black to white. And then we have our texture, which is basically the same thing. I have used, it's like a square regular texture. I inverted it because it was originally black, so that's what it looks like. So I inverted it. You can just do Control I and it makes it white, and then take down the opacity. Then I transformed it to make it look like it's the floor. So basically, if you have a square, you're gonna want to like shrink it down, and then sometimes I pull the bottom edges out, and that's what gives it this effect where it looks like it's the floor. And then I put the same gradient on the layer mask. Here's a layer mask thing down here. Then we have some drop shadows for the athletes or the cutouts, and that's where his foot will go, and then that's where the bigger cutout will be over top of that. So very gradual. Those are just set to like low opacity. Then we have the two background images, and these are very basic. You know, I almost didn't put anything back there at all, but decided to go with like fan arena images and put the skull and crossbones or cross swords in the background. So then I used this texture. I got it from texturelabs.com. That is on my Patreon. It's like a free link to go to his free site. He has a bunch of assets to use, so I definitely recommend him. He also has a YouTube channel if you want to check that out. And so I pulled that lens flare type thing into the graphic, and then use hue saturation. And if you set hue saturation to color or colorize, you can change the color of it basically. So I just bumped the saturation all the way up, made it red, and that is that. Then I did the same thing again over here. Pretty simple. And then I added in a couple more lens flares in the background. Those are also from Texture Labs, so definitely would recommend him for that sort of thing. He has, you know, I'm pretty sure I got this ground texture from his website as well, so check that out. And then I found this sick Baker Mayfield picture online. So that's what it looks like originally, and it's like super high detail. So this is what you want in your graphics, is really, really high detail photos. Basically, to find high detail photos, you are going to Google search Baker Mayfield, go to images. You can do it the easy way and click tools and then click large, or you can do it the more complicated way. Click advanced search, go down to larger than, and then you can pick the size. I would do like 8 or so. Fill that in, and immediately you see the really high quality photos pop up. So this is one of those photos, and you can just see by looking at it. I mean, whoever took this shot is definitely a professional studio photographer, I would say. I think this was for GQ magazine. Yeah, so that makes sense. Then you just save that image, pull it into Photoshop, slap a camera raw filter on it. I usually like to bump up the shadows a little bit, kind of mess with the highlights, depends on how it looks. With something like this, like a well done studio shot, I'm, you know, not going to change that too much, but I bumped up the highlights a little bit because in sports design, you know, you usually want the high contrast look. Bump up the texture, bump up the clarity. You don't want to do this too much. I mean, you know, even this might be too much, but I just like this look. It's a little more detailed. Just don't overdo it if you can. And so then I used a generative fill. This is the shape of it. to take away his necklace in his mouth, because even though that would have been kind of cool, that's just not the vibe we're going for. And then changed his teeth and lip a little bit and kind of kept tweaking that. There's one more tweak. All these are generative fill, so I'm just drawing boxes and stuff around them using this tool or this tool, and hitting up generative fill. Where is it at? There it is. Super easy to do. I use it all the time now. So then we're going to put the shoulder pads on top of him, because even though the GQ look is cool, we want him to be in his football uniform. And then I use generative fill to take out the football helmet strap things, or the chin straps. Take away the shadow right there, and basically drew it around his neck. You can see that's the shape of it, to make it cleaner. And then did it one more time on the other side. So you can see that did an incredible job. And like, you know, you don't really want to use this as a crutch, but when it's this helpful, you use it where it makes things look right and it's easy to use. So then there's just a little bit of minor tweaking. I fixed his chin up on the left, fixed his lip one more time, and then fixed his lip another time. So want all that to look good. And then we put the hue saturation in his eyes. That's set to color eyes, I'm pretty sure. Where is that at? Yep, color eyes set to red. Honestly, I loved how that looked. I almost left it as is. I bumped up the highlights on his uniform because his uniform was kind of dark. So I just used a curves layer and a camera raw filter to bump up his jersey exposure so that it kind of matches with the foreground or the ground element. And then over the top of that whole group, his whole body's in a group, which just makes sense to do right here. Sorry, an ant just fell from the ceiling onto my laptop, so that was good. Then I did the inner shadow effect thing, which just puts a red glow on the outside of him. And that is set to color dodge at 65 size. So pretty basic, nothing too crazy with the lighting. It's like a good backlighting situation, so it's pretty easy to light and make it look decent. Then I just used an exposure layer to darken up right here, his chin and his or his neck and his like chin and whatnot. And that is because a cutout was going to be put in front of him. So then we have a hue saturation, or no, then we have a lens flare that looks like that. And I didn't want it to be that extreme because we're going to put another one on top of it, but I liked the way these things popped out, so I left that and kind of just brushed away what was on his eye. That's set to screen, and then did the same thing within this lens flare. So just put it over top of his eye, set it to screen, and I wanted all of the lens flares to like match that same line, which I think looks good. All of these were different colors, so you want to do that hue saturation thing, which is what I already did to these. I put the hue saturation layer on it, hit colorize, made it red, and then just made them one layer to make it easy for myself. And then you set it to screen and it just looks right. Those are two different lens flares, actually three different lens flares that are on his eye to make it look like that. Set to screen. And then I have another cutout with him shedding a tackle or stiff arming this guy. Same inner shadow. And then I just used a puppet warp to kind of take his legs away because they were cut off at the bottom of the photo. So I wanted to just like move them, and you know, it looks a little weird, but also kind of just looks like he's like stiff arming the dude into the air, onto the ground, whatever. So my idea for this was to put like laser beams coming out of his eyes. And then I put an exposure layer on top of him to darken him up so that he would have some depth behind the front cutout that we're going to put in. And I use a curves layer to brighten up this edge of the football player because he's going to be lasering him in the chest. So that's going to be light, and then the back of him is going to be dark because it's light in front and dark back here. And then the same thing here, another exposure layer. And usually when I have like another team or another cutout in the same graphic, I want to kind of like make sure they're not emphasized. So how I did that here is by blurring him a little bit later on because he's in the foreground, and like desaturating the color in his uniform. And then I used a selective color to change Baker's look because he's kind of green right there. So I just changed the whites to look more white, and everything else I pretty much left the same. Usually you want to tweak like all of the different photos of your athlete to make sure they have like the same color. Then I just used a white brush to go over top of his face guard thing. And that's where the laser is going to come out of. And this is just a color fill set to linear burn. You're going to want to mess with these to like do this effect because they're not all going to look right. So yeah, just a color fill there, brush that in, give it like a red glow. That's where the laser is going to be. Did the same white brush over top again to really emphasize the glow of the face mask. And here is where I added in the laser. So it's just one photo that I duplicated a bunch to give it this like super intense look coming out of his helmet, and just kind of brushed away with different layer masks to make it look right. So that is what it would like originally look like. So I used one to make sure it didn't go behind him, and then the other to brush away like the extra lighting that's not supposed to be there. And then I used another lens flare on his face mask. There's a lot of lens flares in this graphic. And then another one on top of that. So those are two different lens flares, both set to screen, just with different opacities. And then I used another lens flare and put them in a group together with a layer mask on this cutout so that it was like behind him, but you can see like the rays like bursting out from behind him. I think that looks pretty good. And you have like one coming through where his like arm and body don't fully cover it up. And then I put another lens flare over top of his eye. So again, lots of lens flares. And another one up top on the right. I didn't really love how this thing was like curved, so I wanted to make it, you know, look a little bit cleaner. So I just added another one like this one on top of it to give it a little bit more of like a straighter look. And I like how they're like all matching. Like I think that looks good. Usually with lens flares, you want them to all be matching if there's like a distinct, you know, white line in them all. I think that makes it look like it's actually supposed to be there. And then we have this red glow, just a color fill. That's going to be where his gun is. And another lens flare on top of that. So that's a pretty easy way to make like, you know, a lens flare look good, even though it's on his shoe right now, so that doesn't look right. But just put a color fill, I set it to normal, and then a hue saturation layer to make that lens flare look the right color. And then this is a piece of his gun that's going to be coming out. There's the other piece of his gun. So I used AI to make that. I used Midjourney and just typed in like laser cannon gun or whatever. It took a lot of tries to get the right perspective and whatnot, but I think it ended up turning out well. And I didn't like how that looked. It like looked fake, so I ended up brushing a little bit of white on top of it to give it some glow, and then changing the contrast, make it a little more contrasty to match the rest of the graphic, and change the color of it with a hue saturation layer. So I just changed the greens there to like basically red and black, or like red and blackish brownish is kind of the whole like vibe. So then we have our front cutout. This is a really cool cutout, and then I just like brushed away pieces of it where we're gonna hide some of them. And I use a curves layer on his arm, so you can see it on his left arm, and I just brushed that in to make it look like there's like a vein because we're going to have a cord thing going up into his arm right there from like the laser cannon. And then I changed his coloring too. So he looks too green right there. So we're matching him with the rest of the graphic by using a selective color. Change the reds a little bit and change the whites so you can see all these like settings. So I'm changing it from a green look to a whiter look so it just matches everything well. So then I used another lens flare, put that on top of his eye, set it to screen. Another one, set it to screen, put that on top of his eye as well, because he now has laser eyes, obviously. And then we have the other cannon, so that's what it originally looked like. And then I just hid one cord behind his arm. So the cords are actually down here. This is like a cutout too, so it was just like a cannon with some random background. And I removed the background and did puppet warp to make the cords going behind his arm, which is like going into the back of his arm, and then another one going into the front of his arm, and that is where that like lighting comes in. So you can see that it looks pretty good. Like it looks like the cord is going into his arm. And then a hue saturation layer to just change the look of the gun. So we want the laser to be red, obviously, to fit the rest of the graphic. And then like the gun is kind of green, which works. I didn't want it to be too green, but it's okay. It fits the rest of the vibe for now. So I used a drop shadow, which is basically I just duplicated his cutout, like this whole thing with the guns and everything. Duplicated that, put a color overlay that's just black. Then I just dragged that, or like transform it, drag that down, and paste on the ground. And then I blur it and lower the opacity to 18%, and that's what you have. So that's it, not blurred, which looks pretty good too, but I didn't want to do it with this cutout as well. So like I didn't want to have a harsh shadow for him and him. So I just wanted to like make it all uniform so they all have like that kind of faded, blurry shadow. So yet again, another lens flare on top of his other cannon, set to screen. Then I used Midjourney to make Laser Mayfield, and this is a color fill that I put behind Mayfield. It's just a red glow set to screen to just make it look like it's giving off some light. And this was originally orange, and then I just put this hue saturation layer over it and changed it to red. So that looks pretty sick. Sometimes I make my own 3D text, but it's really fun to mess around with AI and see like what it'll pop out for you. And I loved like both of these looks together, and it takes like some trial and error to get it the way you want it. Sometimes there's extra letters and sometimes the letters don't look right, but this has ended up looking right. I kind of wish this M was like capitalized, but you know, it is what it is. And the best place I could find to put it, which I should have like figured this out beforehand, but the best place I could find to put it was up here. I tried down here, it just didn't look right. And then I ended up just liking how it fit here with this lens flare, and it kind of works with his hair too, because like his hair is coming up this way, it points there and goes that way, kind of like on this side. So I just thought that worked well. And then I had to put his actual name down here, so I just picked like a very simple thin font, spaced it out a lot, which usually looks good. If you have like a name or something like that and you space it out, it just makes it look really clean. So then we did the apply image thing, or then I stamped the whole layer and I put a camera raw filter on it and just tweaked everything a little bit. So you can kind of mess with that yourself. It's kind of a preference thing. And then I did the apply image thing and brushed in some dark areas from that. And then I made the screen layer from that and brushed those in. So you can see, if I just take it back and forth, where I brushed it in, basically all the light areas, all the areas I wanted to like emphasize for the most part. Then I used a color lookup, and I liked it the way I had it. Like, I think that looks good, but I also liked how this gave it like a, I don't know what the right word is, like two-tone look or whatever. So we have like a red versus like green aspect. It's like barely green or like tealish. It's like the teal and orange thing. Like that makes stuff look good. So this is like kind of that same sort of vibe, but it's teal and red. And then I used another layer, and that like, takes it away even more. So it's barely even a vibe at that point, but to really like make the whites just look crispy and white. So that's why I ended up going with for the coloring there. And I should have added this in earlier, but I just forgot to, but I wanted to add in the extra detail. So I got these from Texture Labs as well, and they're just spark effects, and change the colors of those. So those are all up here. Those look pretty sick. And then some more over here, and a little bit more down here next to his gun. And it's kind of hard to tell because like there's so much of this graphic that's white, so I had to put it over some dark areas so you could even see it, because they're all, well, I would like to have, yeah, they're all set to screen, so you're not really going to see them on white. So then I used a hue saturation layer to fix his lips because they were a little like dark and bluish. Put a curves layer over top of his eyes to make his face look right, and the small cutout, and just darkened up his left eye to make that look right, because I think it gives that a little better depth. It looked more fake before that. And then just brushing an exposure layer under him to kind of make that shadow look a little better. And this graphic will be on Patreon. This is like one of the cleanest, sickest graphics I've made in a long time, I think. Humble brag right there. So this is the kind of stuff you want to make. Stuff that's like unique and different, but also really cool, really clean. And, wait for someone like Baker to have like a primetime game where he plays really good, which he almost did Thursday night, but they lost. And then post it on social media, tag him, tag like a bunch of football accounts, put hashtags in there, and that is how I would say that's a good recipe to make something go viral. So check this out on Patreon, and we'll see you in the next video.